Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with the fourth installment of my 52 Book Club 2025 Reading Challenge. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I have a playlist of videos where you can go check out all of the previous wrap-ups. I'm reading through all of the 52 challenge prompts for this year and then talking about them in smaller little manageable wrap-ups. As I've said in previous videos, I'm also completing the mini challenges, but I'm not including them in these videos. I may save them because there is one prompt that I will not be able to tackle until at least September. And if that happens to be the last book that I tackle, then I will just include a really brief overview of the various mini challenges that I have also completed. But for now, we're just tackling the main 52. And I'm going to apologize, I do not have the books stacked beside me, so I'll just pop pictures of them on the screen. So the first book that I'm going to wrap up in this video is for prompt 23, which was a book with a sprayed edge. And for this, I read The Last Dragon on Mars by Scott Reintgen. This is a middle grade sci-fi fantasy story, and it is about a boy who lives on Mars and wakes up to find out that the world that he thought he knew is maybe not exactly what he first thought. This book has a really cool mythology where dragons are the reason why life can be sustained on various planets and moons around the solar system. And so there is a story that the dragon that was the king of Mars was killed in order for human life to be able to flourish on Mars. However, the flourishing has not quite happened and Mars is barely inhabitable. But our point of view character discovers a secret and the fact that there is still a dragon on Mars, and it is him learning to work with a new group of people who have to become friends and allies of him and the dragon as they are trying to discover the secret of why Mars is failing. It is the first book in the series and I read it for the Meet Me in the Middle book club for the seasonal prompt of Here Be Dragons. This was a really fantastic middle grade sci-fi book. Highly recommend it. For prompt 26, which was more than 1 million copies sold, I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I apologize if I have butchered that. This is kind of like a cult favorite. This is the story about a cafe, a small cafe that's out of the way, that is very innocuous, where patrons who sit at a particular table are able to travel back into their past to an event that has occurred in that cafe. They are then able to return to the future as long as they finish drinking the coffee before it gets cold. This was a really interesting story. It wasn't a particularly new favorite of mine. I was listening to the audio of it. I was intrigued and I think it was surprisingly emotionally hard-hitting as these characters are visiting the past for various reasons, all to do with interpersonal relationships. It deals with losing loved ones, characters who have dementia, a mother knowing that she's going to have a child but she will die without being able to raise that child. So there's a lot of heavy hitting topics. It was a really interesting read. I'm not exactly compelled to go out and read the follow-up books, but I may at some point if I can get hold of the audio. Then for prompt 34, with a direction in the title, I read Reaching Through Time. Through is a prepositional word, so I'm counting it. This is a personal memoir of an Indigenous Australian woman called Shauna Bostok. She is an academic and she was doing some research into the history of her family, and so this book is the result of all of that research that she has done. She investigates her family tree, looks at the connection and the intersection between her Indigenous family members in her family tree as well as the white family members in her family tree, and the discovery that going back into her family tree, some of the members of her family were slave traders, etc. I've said this before when I've reviewed it. I think I would have enjoyed it more as an audio. That's just the way I prefer to consume memoir kind of content, because I can get a little bit bogged down in the minutiae if I'm reading it. But it was enjoyable. However, I will say it does read like an academic text, so just be aware of that if that's not a style or format that you like. For prompt 37, a genre chosen for you by someone else. Both Heather and Robin chose mafia romance for me because I don't tend to read a lot of that. And they also gave me the book recommendation, which was A Love Most Fatal by Kath, which is honestly one of the most delightful romance books that I've read this year, despite it being a mafia romance. So our MMC is a teacher, and he ends up meeting our female protagonist, who happens to be the head of the local mafia family. Their connection is that he teaches, I think, her niece or her nephew. I can't remember exactly which one it is. And she finds him intriguing and asks him out. And this causes a whole lot of problems as her enemies begin to see him as a viable option for threatening her. And hence, he needs to be taken in for his own protection. And there he learns a little bit more about the mafia family. And my favorite quote in the whole thing, and this is everything you need to know about his personality. He says, "Yes, I'm thinking about taking what I've learned and starting my own mafia. I would invite you, but I think it should just be teachers." I utterly adored both of these characters so much. It's really well written. The pace is excellent. The character connection and character dynamics are amazing. And it left me wanting to read the second book so badly. All I want to do is read the second book. It comes out later this year. I'm really excited about it. For prompt 40, a stream of consciousness narrative, I read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This one I had out on audio, and this one looks at the story of Esther, a talented young woman who is succumbing to mental illness, and from memory is kind of reminiscent of Sylvia Plath's own journey. Why did I pick it up? One, I knew it was a stream of consciousness narrative. I also knew that it's kind of that book that everyone should have possibly read, so it's kind of like a cult classic. It is a very dark book though. It has a lot of content warnings as Esther gets deeper and deeper into her own mental illness and attempts unaliving herself and various other things. So it's not my usual genre. I'm glad I read it, but I would say only pick it up if that's something that you're willing to explore and unpack the content warnings before you dive into it. For prompt 42, a non-human antagonist, I read Washpool by Lisa Fuller. This was an arc that I was sent. It is a young adult fantasy story. I said young adult, it's not young adult, it's middle grade. It is a middle grade fantasy story about two sisters who find themselves traveling through a portal into a parallel world where they meet a range of characters and groups of a community who are currently at odds with one another. The antagonist is a non-human because this group is not only made up of humans, but also animals and various mythological creatures. The two sisters end up helping to broker a peace between these groups, which is the plot of the story. I really liked it. It was fun. It was fast-paced. It weaves in Australian First Nations mythology into the story, which was great. I love reading any kind of Indigenous text because I think it offers so much. I did like how much the characters grow over the course of the story, which was really great to see. For prompt 45, a book where an author releases more than one book a year, I read Possessive Puckboy by Finley and Saxon James. This is like Saxon James's second or third release this year already, so multiple release author. It is a part of the Puckboys series. It is a queer hockey romance, and this one is a high school enemies to lovers story set in their adulthood. So they were kind of enemies in high school. One was a nerd, one was a jock, and now in the present day, that nerd has grown up to be the owner of the hockey team that the hockey player plays for. And the owner starts off making the hockey player's life hell at the start of the book in retaliation for their high school years. But they do have to reconcile, and then this becomes a friends of convenience to lovers kind of story. And it was a lot of fun because I always enjoy visiting the Kiki brothers. The one thing I do want to say about this one is I think it had a really strong message about why we go into a profession. The hockey player in particular starts to question why he even plays hockey and if he even likes playing hockey, which I think is a really interesting take on this sports romance genre. Prompt 50 was a book that was set in the 1940s, and I read Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, which I did a bit of research and it seems to be set around that time, so if I'm a year off, I apologise, but it's close enough. This is a classic, children's classic. I'm currently reading it to my class. It is about a barn spider who hatches a plan to save the life of a pig who lives on a farm. You may have seen the film, you may have read the book. I don't know if I really need to elaborate more on that. I was pleasantly surprised. I don't think I've ever actually read the book. I remember watching the film, so I knew the story. The book is actually quite good, and it's been a really interesting experience reading it to 7 and 8 year olds and getting their take on it as well, because they are deeply enamored by it. We're about 50% of the way through now. It's rather hard hitting. The end will require tissues as you become rather attached to Charlotte, but I also think it's a really great book because it does open up the conversation that animals have far shorter lives for the most part than humans do, and that is just part of life. And that, my friends, is the end of this fourth update for the 52 Book Club Challenge. I can't believe I got this under 17 minutes again, which is amazing. So hopefully this will be even shorter than it currently is through the power of editing. I am about to jump into filming wrap up 5 basically as soon as I finish this one. So there will be a fairly quick turnaround between these 2 wrap ups. And then I think I'm going to be stuck for a little bit because I'm heading into the prompts where I have to intentionally pick books as opposed to just randomly finding them and having them fit challenges, which is fine. In the comments, I'd love to know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on picking any of them up. Otherwise, feel free to share your favorite emoji to let me know that you're here. I hope that wherever you're on the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.